I have a love-hate relationship with that gal we all know named Fantasy Me, but I hate the mess she makes in my craft room.
How do you get through the mental block to reduce the amount of your children's sentimental items?
I have 2 girls, 8 and 5 years old. When I ask her, she needs everything. She tells me she can't let go of anything she has because she needs it.
My husband of 30 plus years has OCD, and I wondered if you had any tips in the situation where a spouse is not wanting to declutter.
Welcome to the Minimal Mom Podcast, where simplicity meets inspiration on your journey to a clutter-free and intentional life. Join us each week as we dive into practical tips, real-life stories, and expert interviews to guide you through the art of decluttering, intentional living, and finding joy in the simple moments. Whether you're a seasoned minimalist or just starting your journey, we're here to help you create a life with less stuff and more meaning. This is the Minimal Mom Podcast.
How do you help with the age gap of children sharing a room? I have a 1-year-old and an 8-year-old girl sharing a room. And I also have a 3, 5, and 9-year-old boys sharing a room. Their interests and likes, and one wants more things, one wants less things. How do I help them navigate what they want in their room?
Brittany, this is such a good question. And even though our kids are closer in age, we still see the differences in their personalities and how they like to keep their rooms. So our daughters are 12 and 14, and one is naturally neater and the other one is naturally messier. And so one doesn't mind if there's clothes on the floor and stuff everywhere, and the other one does. It bothers her. Like, she really likes her space to be neat and tidy. And so what we've done is 2 things. One is to make sure each child has their own space. So even in a very small room like our boys' bedroom, they each clearly have their own spaces in the room, and they get to keep their personal stuff in there. So again, our bedroom situation is our 2 daughters share a room, and then our 2 sons share a room. And so in each room, each of the kids has designated spaces where they get to keep their own things. Even if you don't have a huge room to work with, whether you're using cube shelves and everybody gets a certain number of cubes, or our girls have IKEA beds with the storage drawers underneath, they get to say what goes in those drawers. However you divide it up, just making sure everyone gets their own spaces. The second thing we do is we have ground rules for the room. I know now what clutter does and how it releases stress hormones, and it makes us feel a little bit uneasy. It's actually very important to me that if there is a child that wants their room cleaned up, that their needs take priority over the child that's naturally more messy. And in both pairs, our daughters and our sons, we have a neat one and a not neat one. I have decided that one of the ground rules then is that we don't leave stuff on the floor. So the floors in the bedrooms get cleaned up. Now, that doesn't mean that their personal spaces, it doesn't mean that it's kind of haphazard and things are just kind of shoved in there, but we do have a rule that the floor stays clean, and that just feels better to everyone who lives in the space. So I don't require that the rooms stay perfectly clean and tidy all of the time just because one child would prefer that, but we just have the rule that the floor stays clear, and that has really helped a lot. Even though, again, it's not always perfectly clean, even the children that tend towards being the neater and tidier ones, they feel better about the room than when the floor at least stays clean. And we regularly have times then when they are required to pick up their rooms. Again, mostly I want them to, have to manage this space, to have practice with it. And I want them to manage like sibling dynamics too. Like, I think there's a lot of good character development that goes on through this. And so that is okay that there are compromises and things we have to work out, but we do just have set times then when both of the rooms get picked up, and that feels good for everybody.
Hi, Dawn. Thank you for all of your encouragement. My question is about food that we typically store on the counters. Food items like bananas, bread, potatoes, avocados, onions. Where do you store those items? Thanks again for all of your help.
Thank you, Cheryl. Golly, you just sound so nice. I'd love to have coffee with you. Good question. So I think it is helpful to know your clutterbug style, which tells you how much like a visual clutter you can handle. So for me, I'm a ladybug, which means my organizing style is hidden, out of sight, and macro, like big categories. I don't like fine organizing, like detailed organizing, macro categories, but out of sight. So I love for our kitchen counters to be completely cleared off. Now, some people are visual organizers and they need to see stuff. Like they need to see the important things. Unfortunately, their detriment is that often they leave everything out then. And when everything's out, then nothing stands out as important or like that needs to get eaten up, right? So for me, because I really like our kitchen counters cleared off, I have prioritized and found spots for everything out of sight in our cabinets and drawers and cupboards. The only exception really is the coffee maker and a lot of times the air fryer. So that did mean that we don't have like a fruit basket out anymore. And so that all goes, any kind of produce, bread, the produce goes into our pantry cabinet or in the fridge. And then the bread we have a drawer for. Now, I understand why we leave this stuff out because anything that has a short shelf life, we worry that it's going to go bad if we can't see it or if our family members can't see it. The funny part, fruit went bad in the basket on the counter just as much as it does in our pantry. So I realized that it just becomes background clutter when we leave stuff out on the counters, whether it's bread or produce. And so that wasn't working either. So I learned that it's actually the habit of eating those foods that cause them to get eaten up, not it sitting out in plain sight. Does not matter if it's sitting out in plain sight. So it's more about creating the habit of serving fruit as dessert after a meal or cutting it up for lunches. Or so just knowing when does fruit get used, when do avocados get used, onions, and also realizing a lot of times I was buying too much. And so I've decreased the inventory of that kind of stuff because we also know just because we buy it doesn't mean people are going to consume it in our household. And so I've cut back the amount of inventory, and then I have set times where I serve those foods so that they don't go bad. And mostly though, I recognize that it did not matter if it was in plain sight. It was getting forgotten about just as much in plain sight as it was in the cabinet. I also, probably a third thing I do is that I do check in on it. So at dinner time, I'll often glance through the fridge. Is there anything that needs to get used up? And then also in the pantry cabinet or when I'm meal planning, like, oh, those potatoes look kind of like they're on their way out. We should use those up in the next day or two. So I am aware of it to check in on it when I'm at meal planning as well. So those are my best tips. Again, if you have to leave it out, it's fine. Are there other things that you could tuck away instead? But mostly I love how our kitchen cabinets feel when they are completely cleared off.
How do you get through the mental block to reduce the amount of your children's sentimental items? I am just at an utter roadblock with my children's things.
Kay, I'm so glad that you asked this question because there's a lot wrapped into this. As parents, we don't want to traumatize our kids. We don't want to make a mistake. We don't want them to, when they're older, look back and say, my mom made me get rid of everything. She was so mean. And now I have to go to counseling and therapy to deal with it. And what's been really fascinating is that as I have talked to child psychologists and therapists and people that deal specifically with kids, they reassure us that we are not going to traumatize our kids around their physical things unless we're like ripping their favorite things out of their hands and throwing them in the dumpster in front of them. And, but most of us are pretty aware and we involve them with the process when we can. We might slip stuff out in the garbage from time to time. We all do that, I think. Mostly it's okay, but we're aware of their feelings. So likely you're not going to traumatize your children because you have a good relationship. And even if you make a mistake like I have in the past, we'll make it up to them. We're apologetic. And so it's not deteriorating our relationship or causing them any kind of long-term harm. Now, again, if we have, like when we were getting licensed for foster care, that's completely different. If kids have had trauma around physical things, they have had lack, they've come from poverty, then totally different conversation. But I don't think that's what we're talking about here. Okay, so we're not going to worry so much about traumatizing them. So we're going to set that aside. Now, the next thing is we need to teach them how to manage this type of inventory. So I feel like I've been talking about this kind of a lot lately, but our youngest, Gage, he is so fun. He's really come out of his shell in the last couple of years, and we're just like fully seeing his true personality. He's so funny and sweet and kind, and he is so attached to everything. Candy wrappers, little things from the dollar store, anything that is a gift, like attached. He had wrapping paper I just found in his room from Christmas because that was special to him, like the actual wrapping paper from a gift. Just so many little treasures that he wants to keep. And that's okay. Like I'm okay with my kids having different levels of attachment to things. but also we can't keep all of it. And I want him to learn how to manage inventory while he's living in our home. And so the solution that we've come up with are treasure bins. So he has 2 plastic bins that are probably like 1.5 feet wide by 8 inches deep. They're not huge, but they can actually hold a fair amount of stuff. And so he can keep whatever he wants in his treasure bins, anything that he wants. The only rule is that the lid has to fit on. So every so often when the lid's not fitting on, then we'll go through it. Adeline went through them with him the last time. They did the method. They like dumped them out. She's like, we're going through these. She like dumps everything out. Now, that's not bad because usually the stuff on the bottom are the things that he has forgotten about and he's less attached to. So she went through it with him, like, Gage, can we get rid of this? Can we get rid of this? He's like, no. Like, finally, she finds something he's willing to part with. He did not get rid of many things, but it was enough to make a little room and for the lid to fit on again. And so this is something we practice and we keep doing. And really, I'm making the container the bad guy, not myself. I'm like, you can keep anything you want, but it has to fit in here. And this is a very important skill for him to learn because if we let our kids keep everything, that is very stressful and that is too much for them to manage. Kids are not good at managing inventory. None of us are actually, but kids especially aren't. Their brains are growing and developing. They are learning at hyperspeed, so many new things. They're not good at managing lots of toys and clothes and stuff and all of their little treasures. So this is a way that we can practice with them. Another thing in our home is that if something is on the floor and it's been there for a little while, I give them the chance to pick it up. And if they don't pick it up, then it's mine. And I either toss it, donate it. If it's something like valuable, I'll often like set it aside for a little bit to see if they come back and want it. But if not, if they've lost value for it, I'm not going to have more value. So if there's something on the floor and I'm like, hey, buddy, will you pick that up? And he doesn't, then I'll give him one more warning. And then if not, it's mine. Also, like in their bedrooms, when it gets kind of messy and there's a lot of stuff on the floor, I'll say, it looks like you don't have value for these things anymore because if something's important to us and it has value, then we take care of it. We put it in a bin, we put it up on our desk, we put it on a shelf, we put it in one of our treasure bins. But if this stuff is just kicked around on the floor, that's not showing any care for it because it could get stepped on or broken. So to me, that looks like I'm just collecting data in here. It looks like you don't care about this stuff anymore. So again, I'm going to give you the chance. Anything you pick up, you can keep. Anything I pick up, I get to keep. And often they'll make a pass over their floor and then there's a bunch of stuff left and I will gladly go in and get rid of that stuff because again, I'm not going to have more value for things than they do. Now, one other thing that we sometimes run into though is as parents, sometimes we are more attached to the things than our children are. And so we have to kind of do an audit on ourselves and say, am I wanting them to keep this even though they've clearly lost value for it? Maybe it's a toy they've outgrown or something that used to be special to them, but now it's not. If it's super special, then let's put it in their memory box. That's an important thing to keep. But if not, we might need to grieve it, but then let's move it out because, again, most of us are drowning in clutter in our homes and we have to get this stuff out so that we could regain peace and that we can do the things in our home that we had hoped to with our kids. We can read books with them and play with them. We can teach them things. We can involve them in cleaning and picking up and learning how to cook. Often, a lot of those things go by the wayside because the clutter has crept up so much in our home and it's just way too overwhelming and too much work to involve them in the daily ongoings of the house. So, it's important and it's important that we keep working at it and practicing at it until we figure out a tactic that works for each of our kids.
I have a love-hate relationship with that gal we all know named Fantasy Me. I love her because she is so creative and caring and frugal, but I hate the mess she makes in my craft room. She also hangs out in there with those guys just in case and someday. How do I confront all 3 of them talking to me at once as I try to declutter? Help, I'm outnumbered.
Oh my goodness, Lori, this is the best ever. That is so awesome. You're so clever. Okay. This is tricky. Man, you just brought all of them in, right? This is like such a big question. Okay. Fantasy self. We have to be so realistic about how much time we actually have to craft and sew and do all of these things that we have acquired all of the things for. And so realistically, most of us look down and we have way more stuff than hours in the day. And what's been fun, more recently, I've gotten to work with more gals through craft rooms and through hobby stuff. And my friend Janine sent a video message. I was just listening to it this morning, and she's very artistic. She makes jewelry for a business, and she said as she was looking through her craft room and all of her stuff, she realized that she wasn't using her paints and her watercolors and her canvases anymore. And so she had remembered her sister had said, "Hey, there's this adult center where they, let people who have some cognitive disabilities come during the day to spend time, and they're always looking for more art supplies and craft supplies and that kind of thing." So Janine ended up donating her stuff there. And then when she was doing that, they said, "Hey, would you ever consider coming and teaching an art class here? Like they would love that." And so she said, "Now, God, this is making me emotional to see that. Now she's going 1 or 2 times a month to teach an art class to them." And I was just like, wow, that is so cool that by her decluttering her stuff, not only, I mean, she said, "I feel lighter. It's like a huge weight was lifted off my shoulders." Not only does she get to feel lighter, more free to do the craft she really does enjoy, to let go of the other stuff, but now it also opened up this door for her to volunteer, which we've been talking about lately is just what actually leads to true lasting happiness. And so it was just such a fun story to hear. And so, what I want to encourage you is that this stuff that we have acquired, that we've spent good money on, for most of us, it's become a burden, not an asset anymore. Again, we kind of talk about the scale, how stuff is like helpful, beneficial, makes life better and easier. And then it gets to that point when it's too much and now it's a burden. And now I feel stressed thinking about having to manage it and take care of it and organize it. And many of us spend more time organizing our craft supplies than actually using them. And so we really have to take an honest look and say, what crafts am I still doing and do I still enjoy doing? How much time do I actually have to do these things? Because that's going to help dictate how much inventory I keep. And would it be more enjoyable if I had a way to do this with others? And there's a few ways that looks like. For my mom, it's going to a stamping group. So getting together with other women to stamp in person. She loves that. For Janine, it was volunteering to teach a class now. So to teach her craft to others, which is so cool. Or I also heard from a friend recently who quilts, and she'll FaceTime with a friend. And they have one Saturday a month where they FaceTime. I think she said it for like 6 hours. And so again, it's a way to bring in community virtually and to do their craft together, to get to visit and show each other what they're doing. And so that was just so cool too. So often as we work to declutter, now we have more space and time freed up to be able to do it with others too, which really is so much more enjoyable for most of us. And so that's what I would challenge you with is what would happen? How would it feel if you significantly reduce the inventory in your craft space? Yes, are we grieving some things? Are we letting it go? Like, oh, I thought I was going to make scrapbooks for all of my grandkids. I thought I was going to make a quilt for each grandbaby. I think my mom is still crocheting the next blanket for Kaden, right? Sometimes we have to grieve that fantasy self, the things I thought I was going to do. We have to grieve the money we spent and we have to let ourselves off the hook. We have to forgive ourselves for maybe being careless with some of our resources, for accumulating it too much. But mostly we had good intentions. I think about my mom too. Like, she goes to the stamping parties and often she wants to support the demonstrator. Often they, show new things that look so great and she imagines the beautiful things she'll make. And so most of us, we've come by this pretty honestly that we have accumulated more stuff than we could use. And so you don't have to be too hard on yourself. Many, 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 many women find themselves in this position. So it's totally okay. But also do keep challenging yourself to go further. And often like the practical, tactical tool you can use is just working for 5, 10, 15 minutes at a time. Because again, when we're decluttering, we're being confronted with every wrong decision we've made. So be aware of your own decision fatigue and mental fatigue as you're doing this. And so you might want to just pick a small section, one shelf, one container to go through at a time, make good decisions with it, and then remove the donations as quickly as possible, and then stop and take a break and then go back another time to do it again. But there'll be so much more peace and more enjoyment of these things once you simplify them and pare them down.
Hi, Dawn. This is Marai from Germany. I have 2 girls, 8 and 5 years old. How did you approach the decluttering of the kids' toys? Did you declutter with them or without them? Did you ask their permission? Because the problem we have a lot is, especially with our younger one, when I ask her, she needs everything. She tells me she can't let go of anything she has because she needs it.
Okay, Mariah, another great question about kids things. And you raised some really good points. And it sounds like your 5-year-old is kind of like our 9-year-old now, like super attached. So again, I think the treasure box method is super helpful. So for ages 5 and 8, should we involve them in the process? I think it's up to you. I think at those ages, we could still use like the box it up method where you would send the kids out for a little while. You would go in, box up the bulk of their things, leave out their for sure favorites, and say, we're just doing an experiment. I haven't gotten rid of anything. We're just going to test this out. And I've been talking a lot lately about this idea of hushing your house. And I'm actually going to, I'll have a video of doing the boys' room coming up here where we pulled everything out. And so I'll be excited to share that with you. But often our kids, if we just say, we're going to get rid of stuff, we're going to declutter your room, they don't understand. What will that feel like? How good will it feel to have your room simplified? And so that's what can be kind of tricky. As adults, we have a grid for it, but often kids don't. So okay, let's go through some steps here. Number 1, I would say it's just an experiment. We're not going to get rid of anything, but we're going to try moving some stuff out of your room to see how it feels, whether you involve them with that process or not. Number 2, I would offer some kind of reward. So Gage had wanted new blankets for their beds for the longest time. And so I said, hey, we're going to pull everything out of your room. We're going to do this experiment. And also, we're going to get some new bedding for your beds too. So there was something they were looking forward to and excited about. But we don't get to put it on until we get everything out of your room. So they were really jazzed about that. And then number 3 is to just let the room breathe for a little while. So we pull everything out and we just let them experience it like that. Let it sit like that for a while. And so for us, it ended up being a few days that all of the stuff was out of the boys' bedroom. They loved it. They had not been really playing in their room again because of the inventory just kind of crept up. But now again, they were in there playing, reading, relaxing, listening to music, just hanging out. And it was so fun to see again. So then when it came time and we're like, okay, well, what stuff do you want to put back in? They were really selective. Even our youngest, who is very attached to things, they really liked how their room felt now. And so they wanted to keep a lot of that piece. And so then we were really selective about what we put back in. So for kids stuff, especially toys, I really like using time will tell bins or boxes. Again, where we just box stuff up, get it out of there for a little while, let them experience it, let them realize that they don't miss it. They don't miss the stuff. And we haven't donated or gotten rid of it. So if they ask for any toy by name, then we will gladly go back into a box and get it back out for them. And then usually after 1 to 3 months, then it's pretty safe to donate all of that stuff. But the biggest thing we need to remember is that kids are not good at managing inventory. They're very attached to their inventory, and that can make it hard to declutter with them, but they're not good at managing inventory, and kids thrive in highly simplified spaces. So if you've been feeling at all like your kids are kind of irritable, they're not getting along well, they're not getting engrossed in imaginative play, likely that's because the inventory has crept up too much, and that makes all of us irritable. I mean, we all thrive in highly simplified spaces. So it's such a gift to be able to give our kids this really beautifully simplified space. And also, it's something we have to keep working at and fighting for, because isn't it amazing how quickly the clutter creeps back in? So we just keep going through it over and over and over again. But over time, your kids get very used to this process, and really they develop an appreciation for it too. And some of us have kids, it almost feels like they go too far the other way. They're like, get rid of that, whatever. I would embrace this, because if they don't have value for it, like I was talking about earlier, let it go. Let them experience. Like, they're probably wired in a way that they really do well with very low inventory and in highly simplified spaces. A lot of us have kids that are wired that way, but they don't ever really get that experience because we've just bogged them down with so much clutter and overwhelmed them with it. So if your child is wanting to get rid of like a good bulk of their stuff, I would very seriously consider letting them, because they're probably sending you a message that they're overwhelmed by all of their stuff and they would do much better in a highly simplified space. Now, if it's super expensive, you might want to, again, use like a time will tell bin. But most of the stuff in our kids' rooms could be replaced pretty inexpensively, but I don't think that's going to be the case, and I don't think you'll end up rebuying it. So keep working at it, keep moving stuff out as you're able, and I think your kids will start to develop an appreciation for a really highly simplified bedroom too.
My husband of 30 plus years has OCD and is happiest when his piles are all around him. This is difficult in our shared spaces because clutter gives me anxiety, and I wondered if you had any tips on how to help in the situation where a spouse is not wanting to declutter.
Melanie, I feel a little outleagued by this question. So I'm only going to offer what advice I think I can, staying within my realm of expertise and not overstepping. So I think it's important that you each have designated spaces where he can keep his stuff how he likes it and needs it to be for him, but also that you have your own spaces that you get to keep how you want to. Joshua Becker, early on when we were talking about, not being on the same page with spouses, and obviously your case is a little more extreme with this, right? But what he said was, I like to use the term, can we agree on? Can we agree that it would be nice to park our vehicle in the garage? Can we agree that I do the bulk of the cooking and grocery shopping and meal planning? So I would like the kitchen to be simplified, and I would like to keep it how it works best for me and functions best for me. Can we agree that in our living room, you may have your stuff in this area, but I would like to keep this side how I need it to be? Can we agree that your stuff won't encroach into this area? Can we agree that I need this space in our bedroom to be cleared out and that I need a space where I can go to recharge, and then I'll respect that you need stuff in this area? Could we agree that we're not going to have piles on the floor, because that's actually very stressful to our brain and elicits a fear response when there's stuff on the floor, but you may have it on the table or in this bookshelf or on this piece of furniture or whatever. So I don't know if that would work in your situation or not, but that is one thing that I've learned over the years. Also, even if there's a lot of stuff, if we can keep it more tidy. So having piles stacked neatly, having things contained in a shelf, in a container, not having it like haphazardly stacked up. Again, not having stuff on the floor, not having any kind of garbage or anything else mixed in. So often we wouldn't want to use the word declutter with someone who's very attached to their things, but we might say, could I help you organize this? And so that might just look like keeping things more neatly stacked, and then also removing any garbage that has crept in. That at least visually helps it to feel not quite so stressful as well. So I'm sorry, this is a tough situation, and it just can be so tricky to navigate, but I do hope that over time, as you continue to share what you've learned about clutter and how it impacts you and what you need to do well in that space too, that you guys can find a middle ground. Well, thank you so much for all of the questions. I really enjoy hearing them. I love hearing them from your own voice too. It's just so fun. And I love that we have so many friends from around the world as well. So thank you. There is a link down below. So if you would be willing to record your question and leave it, it's so fun to get to hear from you. So that link will be down below. But I love you. I hope you have a really good day, and I'll see you again soon.
Thank you for joining us on the Minimal Mom Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend who might find value in embracing a simplified lifestyle.